Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. It's a dark day here in Massachusetts, Sap, and you know what? I blame you because you're supposed to be my friend, Sap, and less than 24 hours after the Celtics lose in the finals and have the Warriors celebrate on their home court, you're making me do a show. What kind of friend is that?
Well, I'm looking for good content. What are we supposed to do? Wait 2 weeks to recap what happened?
It's called the
24 hours
Jermaine
ago?
Wiggins. It's called the Jermaine Wiggins method, and you should know that.
Yeah, just update everybody. Jermaine Wiggins used to come into 15-10 every Monday after a Patriots game, unless they lost, and then he wouldn't come in. And just a reminder, Jermaine Wiggins was not playing for the Patriots at that time. He was supposed to be an analyst, and I've always been the person who thinks that the content is better when your team loses because you're angry, you're upset. It's raw. You want to see how you can fix it. You know, you always want your team to win, but I think the content's better after a loss. I mean, I know guys that worked after the Patriots lost to the Giants after the, 18-0 season going into the Super Bowl and got upset by the Giants in that game. They worked, overnight radio, and it's the best radio because everybody calling was pissed and upset and angry and crying, and they may have lost money. And that's better than, wow, wasn't that great? They won again. It's better content. So we had to drag you into this against your better judgment to talk about the Celtics and what happened in the series after being up 2-1 and having a 4-point lead with 5:18 remaining in game 4. From that point forward, to put it bluntly, they sucked.
Yeah, that's not an inaccurate way of putting it. I think I'm a little bit still, I think I protected myself after game 5, Sap, because we both went on the show the other day, gave our thoughts who was going to win game 6. We both thought it was the Warriors. I had Warriors in 6 from the get-go. Not that I'm patting myself on the back because I wish I was wrong, but I just felt going into this game based on what their body language was in game 5 and how they lost that game, as you mentioned, blowing a lead, not a big lead, but still blowing a lead. That they just, I didn't think they were capable of winning this game. And hey, to their credit to start, they came out like a house on fire, quick 12-2 run. And then from that point on, it was all Warriors. So, I think the Celtics were like confused. They're like, they're going to compete in this game. We just went on a 12-2 run. This is our game. We're going to go to game 7, right? And Golden State was basically like, yeah, there's a full game here. It's not the first 5 minutes that we're playing. And then they just blew the Celtics doors off. And, the final score of the game, 103-90, exactly the range that Golden State has been scoring in every single game, Sap, and that they've won. And the Celtics offense just absolutely, since they won game 3 of the series, has had no answers for the Warriors defense, specifically more so because they just turned the ball over, Sap. I don't know that the Warriors defense did anything spectacular. I'm not trying to take away anything from them. They're very good defensively. They're very active hands, but I mean, you can't.
They were second in the league this year in defense. See, this is where I push back when.
Yeah, but Sap, 22 turnovers. I don't care what defense you're playing. 22 turnovers is self-inflicted.
Well, some of those are forced turnovers, right? Not unforced turnovers. My only point is that the Celtics were the best defense in basketball this year. Golden State's was the second best defense. It's just no one ever thinks of that, right? Because we think Steph Curry is a liability on defense, which he normally is, but he always seems to be in the right place at the right time. Draymond's still an elite defender. And Andrew Wiggins not only did a great job against Jayson Tatum in this round, he did a great job against Luka Doncic in the prior round. So, I'm not going to take blame away from the Celtics. They were god-awful, but this had a lot to do with Golden State being damn good too, and also being a more composed team than the Celtics, right? Because just look at those runs that we saw in the final 3 games, right? The Celtics are up 4 with 5:18 left in game 4. Golden State goes on a 17-3 run. The Celtics get a lead somehow late in the third quarter of game 5. Golden State goes on a 21-6 run, game over. And then after the Celtics were up 14-2 and kind of volleyed back and forth with Golden State last night, Golden State goes on a 21-0 run to take control of the game, and that stretch went to 35-8. So, I mean, they had these 3 massive stretches in each game where they just dominated, and the Celtics were never able to recover. See, the thing is with this is the more I looked at this, and going into the series, I felt the Celtics were the better team. But the more I watched it, I think Golden State's better, and I'll go to the bench, and the bench alone And these are just really, really ghastly numbers. In games 5 and 6, Derek White, Grant Williams, and Peyton Pritchard combined for 82 minutes played, 3 of 19 from the floor. That's 15.8%, 9 points. Their plus minus was a combined minus 95. That's your 3 bench guys. Meanwhile, Jordan Poole or Gary Payton II were all contributing something a lot better than that.
The Celtics bench was horrendous, and the guys that the Celtics fans were really excited about, like Grant Williams, who saved you in Game 7 against the Milwaukee Bucks. And if you're a bench player and you can buy a team a playoff win, I think you take that. But since that game, he did not put in really many more strong performances, and he did not have a good series. Peyton Pritchard had a bad series after Game 1. Derek White really disappeared in this series. So the Celtics bench was bad. You no way around that. But ultimately, the story, Sap, in terms of how we're looking at the players, it starts with Jayson Tatum having a bad series, and there's no way around that. He had a bad series, averaged 21 and a half points, far below what his regular season average was. Almost 4 turnovers a game, which is horrible. Six, almost 7 rebounds and 7 assists. You live with that, but the shooting, Sap, was just really bad not from 3, where he shot pretty well, 41, almost 42%, but his field goal percentage in the series, Sap, 36%. What the hell? That's awful.
He shot 30% from 2. If he had just shot normally from 2, those numbers obviously would have been higher, and you'd probably be getting ready for Game 7 in San Francisco. I mean, that's how bad he was. Last night he had 13 points, only 2 in the second half. He was 1 of 8 from the floor in the second half. He disappeared, and give Jaylen Brown credit. He kept fighting. And Jaylen Brown's not always the most efficient scorer, and I know he gets criticized for his turnovers, but at least he fought last night, right? I thought Al Horford fought. I also thought Robert Williams III, who's dealing with that knee, fought. I thought that
those were their 3 best players, undoubtedly, last night.
Without question. Tatum was god-awful. Marcus Smart just was not composed, and your point guard has to be composed at some moment. And, obviously the bench, we detailed Derek White, Peyton Pritchard, and Grant Williams were just abysmal. I mean, I don't even know what other word to use to describe those 3 guys. And it's not a surprise with Derek White, because he performed in the playoffs 3 years ago with San Antonio, where he had a 4-point game and a 36-point game. Talk about trick or treat. That's kind of what Derek White is. So, yeah, it starts with Jayson Tatum. He's your best player, first team All-NBA. He was supposed to be the best player in the series, and clearly he wasn't. He wasn't even the second best player in this series. He wasn't even the third best player in this series. He'd have to go down the list only because he scored some points, but he was incredibly inefficient. Look, Steph Curry was the best player in this series. You can make a case that Andrew Wiggins was the second best player.
I would.
Then Jaylen Brown. Yeah, I mean, and then go from there at some point. And as much as people want to rag on Draymond Green, I thought the last 3 games he was really good. He played the way Draymond Green plays. What did he have last night? 12, 12, and 8, and stellar defense. That's a Draymond Green game.
2 steals, 2 blocks also, and efficient from the floor. I mean, 5 of 10 from the floor. He had a great game last night. He did. So, go ahead, Seb.
No, just in sense that, when you lose this type of series, you look to your best player, and he just wasn't ready for the moment. And again, he's 24 years old. It's his 5th year, and we'll detail. It took Jordan till his 7th year and LeBron till his 9th year, and yada, yada, yada. And that's all impressive. I don't think Jayson Tatum, in fact, I know he's not LeBron James or Michael Jordan. He could be a great player, a future Hall of Famer. He can win a championship. Let's not bury him yet. He's only 24 in his 5th year. But it wasn't as if he just shot poorly. It's just the way he carried himself. Even his body language was kind of a turnoff. Jaylen Brown looked much more like the best player on that team because he kept fighting and fighting and fighting, whereas Jayson Tatum it seems like he lost his heart down the stretch of the series.
Yeah, it's happened. They were both turnover machines in this series, and really throughout the playoffs. Jayson Tatum has the dubious honor now of becoming the first NBA player with over 100 turnovers in a postseason, which is god awful. I can't believe that that's possible, and he accomplished that. But at least last night, both of those guys, 5 turnovers apiece. Terrible. But at least you got the 34 points out of Jaylen Brown, 13 out of Jayson Tatum. That's all he mustered last night. And you happened to lose by 13. So it's just the turnovers, and so many times with Tatum, they were just like careless passes or driving into the lane with like four guys, stuff that he was doing so well in other series and throughout the regular season where he was making such good decisions. It's like he forgot how to be that really good playmaker we saw him morph into. And like you said, Sap, you don't want to just totally rag on the guy because he did have, for the most part, a very good postseason. And obviously he had a spectacular regular season, first team All NBA. But this was where people were really counting on him to show that he's arrived. And he'll be the first person to say it, I'm sure. He shrunk in this series, and he was oftentimes a detriment to what the Celtics wanted to do. Last night, certainly, I think he hurt more than he helped last night. His plus minus was a negative. Take that for whatever you will. But it was a frustrating series to watch as a fan for him. And, I'm sure for himself, he was feeling very frustrated that he wasn't able to get anything going at all and be just so inefficient, and to put the ugly cherry on top of that sundae, he was inefficient and turned the ball over left and right. You can't have your best player doing both of those things and expect to win a series. And so for the Celtics, I think there's a lot of questions about, okay, what could he have done differently? Why do we not have the mental discipline to be able to look at our mistakes and correct them? And I think that the biggest takeaway from this series, Sap, is that the Warriors, their experience is what carried the day for them, and that they were not just mentally tougher, but that they were able to sort of, when the chips went down and stuff, say, we've been here before. We know how to get out of this situation. We know how to overcome any mistakes we've been making and be able to turn this around. And lo and behold, they finished the series off by winning 3 games in a row, 2 in Boston, and winning their 4th championship.
It came down to 3 C's: consistency, composure, and Curry. And if you look at, and I didn't rehearse that, that just came to the top of my mind. So that's pretty good.
Very impressive.
Very impressive. But just look at how consistent they were in terms of their points scored: 108, 107, 100, 107, 104, 103. No, that's not how many turnovers Jayson Tatum had in the postseason. Those are the points scored by the Golden State Warriors in the 6 games. Incredibly consistent. Meanwhile, look at the Celtics. In their 2 wins, they scored 120 and 116. They look like the Showtime Lakers of the 80s. In their 4 losses, 97, 94, 88, 90. Golden State was the student that took 6 classes, got 2 A's, an A minus, and 3 B pluses. Very consistent. They're on the dean's list. The Celtics took 6 classes, got 2 A's, 2 C minuses, a D, and an F. That's how inconsistent their offense was.
It's a great point, Sap, that this team just absolutely could not find any sort of consistency in this series. And that happened to them in these other series, but this was the best team they played. So obviously they weren't able to overcome that. And when you're talking about, you expect your role players to be inconsistent, right? And your bench guys to be inconsistent. You expect Al Horford, he's going to have a good game, 2 good games, and then he might have some games where he doesn't show up, which is exactly what he did. Same goes for, Marcus Smart. Okay, he's, going to have a good game. He'll have a bad game, stuff like that. But Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown, you can't live with them being inconsistent. And as we're just going to keep harping on, Sap, it comes down to, in the NBA, your star players, if they play consistently really well, you have a damn good chance of winning, not just an individual game, but a series or a championship. If they don't, you're not going to. And that's what happened to the Celtics. And so they lacked the sort of veteran leadership that the Warriors had. They lacked the experience that the Warriors had. Obviously, no team can really match that. And so I think ultimately, though the Celtics had advantage in this series, I definitely think they had, we know they had the youth advantage. They had the athleticism advantage in my mind. They were a bigger team, a stronger team than the Warriors. And yet, despite those advantages, it's the Warriors winning 4-2, and in some games breezing to wins. The Celtics really, in the last couple of games, just a couple of short stretches where they looked good, and for the rest of it, it was all Golden State.
And you look at 2 glaring statistics from last night's game, Jet: 22 turnovers by the Celtics, 22 turnovers, And then you look at Golden State's ability to rebound on the offensive end. They had 15 offensive rebounds. The Celtics had 30 defensive rebounds, meaning 1 out of every 3 shots that Golden State missed, they retrieved for an offensive rebound. And that's a team that kills you with offensive rebounds, because what happens oftentimes, kick it out to Curry for a made 3, or Jordan Poole for a made 3, or Klay Thompson for a made 3, although he was not very good in game 6. But you get my point. Even Andrew Wiggins had 4 threes. Hell, Draymond Green had 2 threes. You know, with he's when he shoots from 3, he's so flat with his shot and his shooting motion, it feels like I'm watching a kangaroo shoot, right? Like he kind of just jumps up like he's wearing a backpack or something. But heck, the thing went in a couple of times last night. So again, 22 turnovers. It just continually got worse in the series. Didn't even get better. And then when you give up 15 offensive rebounds to a team that you should out-rebound, you're the bigger, more physical team, there's no way in hell you're going to win.
No, Sap, you heard me talk about it all series long. The Celtics should not just be winning the rebounding battle. They should be dominating the rebounding battle. And last night they got their asses handed to them in rebounding, Sap. It's not even that the you look at it, the final rebound tally, 44 for Golden State, 41 for the Celtics. You go, oh, it's pretty close rebounding. You know, some of those were in garbage time. The game was well within hand. Golden State kicked their asses rebounding. And a lot of those, Sap, and I talked about this before, is effort. With rebounding, a lot of it is effort. And the Celtics, once Golden State got it rolling, we're just like, this, it's not going our way tonight. Well. And Golden State was getting rebounds that they had no business getting. If the Celtics had put in a modicum of effort with some of those plays that the Warriors ended up getting an offensive rebound, and as you mentioned, threes or putbacks at the rim, the Celtics did a little bit better job boxing out or a little bit better job hustling to a loose ball. It's a different game. And so I criticize, and I think I fault, I think fairly, the Celtics' effort on the boards in this series. And again, they should have had a massive rebounding advantage. I know Curry is a good rebounder for his position, Sap, but look at their starting lineup last night and the way it was the past couple of games. Green, Porter Jr., Wiggins, Curry, Thompson. Their tallest player is Green. He's what, 6'9", 6'8"?
Not even. He's 6'6". I'd say Otto Porter's probably their tallest player, 6'7", 6'8". Yeah, I mean, it's not a big team.
You should not be losing a rebounding battle to that team when you have, Robert Williams, who, can jump on a pogo stick and look like the same as he's just jumping off of, the parquet floor. Al Horford to his credit, had a good rebounding game last night. He had 14 rebounds. Jayson Tatum, only 3 rebounds last night. That's unacceptable. He needs to rebound far, far better than that. And Grant Williams, 1 rebound. I mean, he's your backup big. That you can't have that. So inexcusable, I think, effort for the Celtics on the glass. And as you like to quote from time to time, Pat, is it Pat Riley? No rebounds, no rings, Sap?
Absolutely. No rebounds, no rings. He used to put that forward to the Lakers, because when the Lakers played the Celtics in the 80s, the Celtics won the title in 84. They just out-physicaled and out-toughed the Celtics and out-rebounded them. And from that day forward, Pat Riley was headstrong on no rebounds, no rings. And when he finally was able to construct his own team when he went to New York and Miami, he always built these physical teams because he never wanted to lose the way he lost in 1984. Yeah, Jayson Tatum, 3 rebounds. And again, Larry Bird's first finals appearance was in 1981. He was not the finals MVP. Cedric Maxwell was, as Cedric Maxwell will always remind us of, that he's one of only 32 or now 33 players in the history of the league to have a finals MVP, and he deserved it. Max deserved it in 1981. Games 3 and 4 in Houston, Bird had back-to-back 8-point games. He was 3 of 11 from the floor in those 2 games, in each of those games. 3 for 11, 8 points. That's abysmal, right? I mean, if that happened today, talk radio, Fox Sports 1, ESPN, it would be dominating what the hell is wrong with Larry Bird. However, in those 2 games, he accumulated 27 rebounds and 15 assists. If you're not scoring, you're not shooting well, you've got to be great enough to go, well, let me rebound. Right now, I've got to have the good sense to understand that we're getting out-rebounded, especially when Golden State's on the offensive end. I've got to help. You got 3 rebounds? I mean, Steph Curry, who's, 7 inches shorter than Jayson Tatum, had 7 rebounds. His last two games at TD Garden, Jet, Steph Curry had 77 points and 17 rebounds. I mean, that's pretty impressive. Have it.
And Sap, it's not just that Tatum didn't, and again, we're piling on him, and I feel bad doing that because I'm sure he feels terrible today. But listen, this is professional sports; that's how it goes. if you're not going to score and you're not going to rebound, then you damn sure can't be turning the ball over left and right too. And so it's not even like he wasn't doing, oh, he's not rebounding, he's not scoring, but then he's giving away the ball too. I mean, there's nothing that you could point to that he did well last night and say, yeah, Tatum had a good effort. Really, the team lost, but he put in a good effort. He didn't, plain and simple. And Zap, looking at what we talked about turnovers in this series, the Celtics' inability to hang on to the ball and to learn from their mistakes. Game 2, 18 turnovers, they lose. You go, oh, well, okay. This has been a problem. It was a problem in Miami series. They can learn from that. They win game 3. Okay. Yeah. Hey, they learned from it. Game 4, 15 turnovers. Not great, but hey, maybe they can learn from it. Nope. Game 5, 18 turnovers. Wow. Going in the wrong direction. And then to cap it off, game 6, 22 turnovers. So it just got worse, Sap, as the series progressed. Not only did they not learn their lesson, they made it worse, which is hard to imagine.
0-8 when they had 16 or more turnovers. That was the magic number, and that was the case for most of the series. And that's why
they were at that at halftime.
Yeah, I mean, it was just abysmal. I mean, that stretch that Golden State put together towards the end of the first quarter into the beginning of the second quarter was 21-0. And then they stretched it out to 35-8. It just looked like, a varsity team playing against JVs, and the JVs were just giving up, with the exception really of Al Horford and Jaylen Brown. Those guys kept fighting and fighting. And Rob Williams was blocking shots and giving you his best. Again, he's less than 100%. But the other guys just looked like the moment was too big for them, getting stupid fouls, continually to complain to the officials, which, even Mark Jackson and Jeff Van Gundy were talking about, like, at some point you got to stop this, because you're not going to get calls by doing that. And you're also hurting your team by not getting back on defense. So it was just one of those things. They're up 2-1, up 4 points with 5:18 left in game 4. I mean, they looked like the better team up until that point, and then they just collapsed and they never recovered.
Yeah, I opened up saying, Sap, it's almost like when they went on their run to open the game, it's almost like they expected the Warriors to just fold and say, okay, well, we're comfortable going back to game 7 in San Francisco. I don't know why you would think they would do that, but that seemed to be the Celtics' expectation. So, frustrating, very frustrating series. It does seem like they left wins on the table without a doubt. And you can't take for granted getting to the finals. It's not, you talked about this the other day, Sap, in any sport, it's not so easy to get back. And you can't just say, well, we have that young core of Brown, Tatum, Smart, Rob Williams, those are all young guys. They'll get back. You don't know. And, if I'm looking at the landscape of the NBA, actually it's better to look at the landscape of the Eastern Conference. I expect a lot of these teams to improve. You don't just lose to a team in the playoffs and say, well, maybe we'll get them next year, especially veteran teams, like Milwaukee, like Brooklyn, like Miami. Those teams are all going to be looking to improve. And I think they all really can improve, Sap. So, the Celtics, it's not a lock that they're going to get back there. I think that, Milwaukee's looking at it today and said, man, if we just had a healthy Chris Middleton, we could be here today and being the NBA champions. Because I don't think that Milwaukee would have made those types of mistakes consistently. And I also don't think that Golden State would have had an answer for Giannis. But I think with Brooklyn, they can go into next season and say, we have a legitimate big 3 if we can make sure Kyrie Irving shows up and Ben Simmons wants to play basketball. So, they have the potential of getting better. Pat Riley in Miami, Sap, they're not going to rest on their laurels. They're going to be star hunting. They're going to be looking to improve. Jimmy Butler is desperate to win a championship. So you can't just say, good effort, Celtics. It was a nice run, which it was, but let's run it back. I texted you that. I think I wrote it on Twitter too. You can't just say we have a good core, we're going to run it back. You have to be constantly trying to get better. And so that leaves this offseason with a lot of questions for the Celtics, because it's not so clear what exactly they need to get. It's more of an abstract leadership thing.
Yeah, and free agency doesn't start till August 2nd this year, if I'm reading things right, which is a surprise. Normally it's the first week of July, but the research I've done says August 2nd, unless I'm just misreading this. The draft is coming up this week. They don't really have any valuable picks. They have the 53rd pick overall. They traded their first round pick, for Derek White. So we'll have to see what happens in free agency. Are there any players there? Is Wick Grossbeck going to go into the luxury tax? That's the other thing, too. You're fighting Golden State, which has a $345 million payroll because Joe Lacob and Peter Gruber pay $170 million tax. They're ready, willing, and able to sign any checks to keep that team together. I mean, Andre Iguodala is making 8 figures, and he's essentially an assistant coach, right? I mean, he just, is there because of his leadership and high basketball IQ. What are the Celtics going to do? You can't just roll back this team because it just doesn't work that way. Even if you win the thing, you don't roll the team back. You have to make some sort of changes. Remember the Red Sox in 2018? They won the World Series and pretty much brought the whole team back and then went from 108 wins to 84 wins. That just doesn't work in sports. You've got to change some things up. I know this is going to piss you off. I would start to explore trading Marcus Smart. And the reason being is his value is at its highest right now. Defensive player of the year, had his best season, has a friendly contract. He's not a real point guard. I think the best role for Marcus Smart with the Celtics would be as a 6th man. He should be coming off the bench, leading your second unit. I think that would be a perfect role for him. He's not going to accept that. He thinks he's part of a big 3 with Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown. I think at this point, it might be a good idea to move on from Marcus Smart, get as much as you can, because I think that's the way Tatum and Brown are going to grow. It's a risky move. Again, Smart's an outstanding player. And again, the second half of the year was his best stretch in his career. But that's one move I would explore because I think you do need to shake that up at some point.
Yeah, listen, I love Marcus Smart. I'm not opposed to anything that would get them closer to winning a championship, Sap. I think that you can't go in with the mentality of saying this guy's off limits, that guy's off limits, and saying that then you're saying that, okay, what we have is good enough, which clearly it isn't. I think that I agree with you that Smart has shown flashes of being a true point guard, but it's just he's not a consistent true point guard. And I don't know if he's his best role as a 6th man. Maybe it's an off-ball guard. I'm not sure. But if you can, I think if you do trade him, it needs to be in a package where you're getting a better player than him, right? Like you can't trade him and just say you're getting a player who's more of a traditional point guard. You need to get a player who's not a better, that's just a better fit, but a legitimately better player. I was kicking around some ideas with my friends last night, just kind of doing a post-mortem on the Celtics, and I think that option 1 for them in terms of best case scenario is they look to add a 3rd star level player, via sign and trade. And any sort of sign and trade would have to start with Marcus Smart because you got to make the contracts work. It probably would include Al Horford and maybe Rob Williams too. So, Bradley Beal is a name that obviously has been talked about because him and Jayson Tatum have a connection. I don't know if Bradley Beal has any interest in signing in Boston or whatever, but you got to do your due diligence. I think what I saw in this playoffs in this series is I think that as really as good of a player as I think Jaylen Brown is, Sap, and as well as he played last night, and he did play very well, I think he's best suited as a 3rd option on a team. I really do, because his dribbling ability becomes a detriment when you try to go to him to be a primary scorer. And if he's facing double teams, he's going to dribble off his foot or dribble on in the other guy's knee. And so I would like to see him in a similar role to what the Warriors were just using Andrew Wiggins in. I think that he would be a lot more comfortable in that role. So if you could bring Bradley Beal in, that would be fantastic. I don't know if that's realistic at all. I also, I kick the tires and see if Danny Ainge is willing to talk about a Donovan Mitchell trade potentially. That's the first thing I look at. I don't know that it's realistic at all, Seth, but I think you have to do your due diligence in trying to look at bringing in another primary scoring option, because the Celtics scoring in the series just dried up.
Yeah, you do. I mean, again, other than the 2 games they won, they couldn't crack 100. They averaged about 92 points per game in the 4 losses. And meanwhile, Golden State was just trudging along at the 108, 107, 103. I mean, just consistent. So you do need more scoring. I was thinking if you're going to keep the core together, if that's one option, then you start to look at veteran players who can fill roles. And one role I think they need is a pure shooter. And again, a Kyle Korver type player, not Kyle Korver, he's retired, but that type of 3-point shooter, knockdown 42, 43% shooter from 3, JJ Redick type player who can give you 18, 22 minutes a game, that when things are drying up, they can keep you afloat in the game. by hitting a couple of threes. I think they need that. I also think they're going to need some help and get another big guy. Not that the league is trending in that direction. It's that Al Horford next year will be 37. We know that Robert Williams, he's not the most durable guy. And Grant Williams, he's an undersized big at times, but I think you could use a little more help because Daniel Tice is not the answer.
He was worthless. Unfortunately, he didn't bring anything to the table, Tice.
Right. So I think you need some help there.
Sap, Joe Ingles is a free agent. He's a guy has been a knockdown 3-pointer. He's older now. He's 34, coming off surgery. That could be a guy they look at, try to maybe a 1-year deal as a shooter. Just a name that pops out to me. TJ Warren is a guy we've seen can score in bunches. He's a free agent. He's been hurt the past couple of years. The guy I really like as a free agent, I know I've said this for a few years now, Sap. He's not necessarily a shooter, but I think he could fill that point guard void for the Celtics, is Ricky Rubio. I've always been a big Ricky Rubio fan. He was hurt this year. I don't know what kind of money he would command. I think he would be a good fit on the Celtics. He's also a sneaky good defensive player, gets a lot of steals. So there's options. They have their mid-level exemption. They have those the traded player exemptions that they got for trading some of these guys. So they have a little bit of wiggle room with the free agency stuff. But I think that to really get a guy that's going to be an impact player, they might have to look the sign and trade route, which means that one of these guys who was a key contributor in this team could very likely be moved. And I think you have to be willing to do that, Sap, if you're the Celtics.
Yeah, you have to be bold at some point because, again, just rolling it back guarantees you nothing. As you said, Milwaukee will be better if Chris Middleton's healthy. Miami's always in play to make a big deal. From what I understand, Donovan Mitchell is trending towards Miami. So that would be a big addition for the Miami Heat. If Philadelphia and Brooklyn ever figure it out, they could obviously be very, very dangerous. So the Eastern Conference is much deeper than it's been in the past. So, let's not forget that you won back-to-back 7-game series against Milwaukee and Miami. Those are the types of series that can flip in any other direction. Heck, if Jayson Tatum doesn't have that 46-point outburst in Game 6 against Milwaukee, you would have lost in the second round. And now it will be looked at as a real disaster.
Cans a 3 at the end of the Game 7, you probably aren't in the finals. So it was sometimes it's a razor thin margin, Sap, and you can't just say run it back. We'll be right here again. You got to be constantly trying to improve. So that's sort of, we'll get much more into the Celtics offseason as the offseason continues, but that's just sort of a quick look at it. And I think what we wanted to do too, Sap, is now talk about the winning team and the Golden State Warriors, and more so the guy who won his first Finals MVP in Steph Curry. And he was obviously, I think, a very deserving. He was spectacular in the series, and he capped it off with a great game last night, Sap. Finished with 34 points, 7 rebounds, 7 assists, a couple of steals, and even a block. And on the series, Sap averaged 30 points, 31 points a game, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, shot 42% just about from 3 and 48% from the floor. Just had a really, really a very, very good series. 3 30-point games, a 40-plus point game, and wins his first, again, Finals MVP to go with his 2 regular season MVPs. Now he's got 4 rings, bunch of first team All NBAs, whatever. So the question is, Sap, where does this move Steph Curry? Because it should elevate him. Where does it move him in terms of the all-time rankings? Some people want to say top 10. I don't know that I'd go there yet, but Sap, what's your opinion?
Well, I'm working on a column right now, and this is the most difficult column I've had to write in a really long time because I'm kind of weighing through all of this, and I'm trending towards putting him at number 10. And again, when I make this list, I have to have 10 players on the top 10 list. This is what infuriates me, is when people just start saying, yeah, Kevin Garnett's a top 10 player, or Moses Malone's a top 10 player, or Olajuwon's a top 10 player. And I'm like, okay, instead of who? And again, now there's other ways you can do this. I know Nick Wright, who you don't like, but I do. He's working on the top 50 of the last 50 years. So that now eliminates Bill Russell and Will Chamberlain and Jerry West and Elgin Baylor and those all-time great players. I know one list you could work on is post-merger, which would be from 76 on. But in terms of the entirety of the NBA, my top 10 list is over the last few years. I've juggled it around because I did put LeBron at number 1, and I have him at number 1. I have LeBron followed by Jordan. me, those are the two guys. I think that's where it starts and ends with the top two. Then I also put Russell and Kareem up there at 3 and 4. That to me is the Mount Rushmore. Those are the 4 most accomplished, greatest players in the history of the sport. So LeBron, Michael Jordan, Bill Russell, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. The next level to me is Wilt Chamberlain, Magic Johnson, and Larry Bird at 5, 6, and 7. Curry can't crack that list. Those 7 guys are better. 8 and 9 for me has been Tim Duncan and Kobe Bryant. I still can't put him above those 2 guys because those guys have 1 more championship each. Duncan and Kobe have 5 championships. Steph has 4. And Duncan and Kobe were much better defenders. So I can't put them above. I can't put Steph above those guys. I could put him as high as 10, and that would mean taking out Oscar Robertson, which I'm fine with because now we've got Curry with 4 championships. He's won 2 scoring titles. As you said, now he's a finals MVP. And the thing is, the knock against Oscar Robertson, and he's a very polarizing player in the history of basketball. I know some, historians think he's one of the greatest players ever, and other historians think he had no heart, that he was a guy who really didn't play well with teammates and really never won anything. But I will let you know that Baylor and Robertson and West and Chamberlain didn't win a lot because Bill Russell was winning every year. It's kind of like poor Karl Malone and Charles Barkley weren't able to win because a guy named Michael Jordan dominated the decade. So I could put Steph at 10 and maybe slightly ahead of Oscar Robertson, Elgin Baylor, Jerry West, Moses Malone, Olajuwon, and Shaq. Now, the interesting one is Shaq's the only one of that group that has as many titles as Curry. And I always have a tendency of underrating Shaq. I just thought he could have been better. Maybe that's not a real good excuse not to rate him higher. Like, I always felt like he underachieved because he was always kind of out of shape and disinterested. When he was interested, he was dominant. So I'm leaning towards putting Curry at number 10. It's not a great answer, Jed, because it's very nuanced, but I think you've got to consider him up there with all these accomplishments. And I don't even get into how he changed the game, and that he's the greatest shooter ever. That's a different argument, right? I mean, I can't just say, oh, well, he changed the game. That's not being the greatest player. And shooting is a skill. Look, I think Aaron Rodgers throws the football better than Tom Brady. I think most people would agree, but everyone agrees that Tom Brady's the better quarterback. You see what I'm saying? So yes, Curry's the greatest shooter ever. So I can't just say, well, we've got to elevate him because he has this one skill that he's better than everybody.
Yeah, I think it's difficult, Sap, because I think Curry is also a polarizing player like Oscar Robertson. Like, if I'm looking at it in terms of accomplishments now, I kind of feel like you have to put him in the top 10 because of all these accomplishments now.
Mm-hmm.
But like, if I'm looking at it and comparing him to a former teammate of his and Kevin Durant, and I've watched both their careers. I've been an avid basketball fan for far longer than they've been playing. If I had to start a franchise, I would still start a franchise with Kevin Durant over Steph Curry. So it's tough because Curry's accomplished more than Durant. You can't argue that. So his accomplishments, I think, put him higher on the list than Kevin Durant. But I honestly believe Kevin Durant's a better player than Steph Curry. Mm-hmm. So it's really difficult, Sap. I don't know that there's obviously not a right or a wrong answer, but it's like, how do you rank your top 10? Do you do it off of pure skill, or do you do it off of accomplishments? Do you try to do it off of a combination of both? But
it's a mix. It's a mix. I think, talent, accomplishments, championships you throw in there. Heck, if Wilt Chamberlain had won 6 championships, the debate would be over. The guy was ridiculous. He averaged 50 and 25 for an entire season while playing over 48 minutes a game. If he won the championships, he only won 2, and one he was not the best player on the team. In the 72 Lakers, Jerry West was the best player. So, but the championships do matter, and the accolades. And you also have to look at context, right? Like, who did you beat? Who did you lose to? That's why I always put LeBron up there, because LeBron was facing better teams in the finals than Jordan faced. I think that's a fact. So although LeBron's 4-6 in the finals and Jordan's 6-0, I think it's a lot closer in terms of what they accomplished as teams because of who LeBron was facing in the finals, and also the fact that LeBron went to multiple teams and got to the finals where Jordan never won without Pippen or Phil Jackson. And look, they never won. Well, Phil Jackson did win without Jordan. What am I talking about? He won 5 titles in LA, but he's a coach. Let's not go into that. But yeah, no, it's a tough thing to do. I agree. Durant's a better basketball player than Steph Curry, right? Because all that offensive ability and shooting, he could shoot almost as at the level of Steph Curry. He's got more ways to score than Curry, a better defender, better rebounder, almost as good a passer, right? But I think Curry maybe wins out because of the leadership, the ability to play well with others, being more self-aware. I mean, let's face facts, Durant's kind of a train wreck, other than when he was in Golden State, right? I mean, the Russell Westbrook Durant thing just didn't work out. Now the Durant Kyrie Irving thing hasn't worked out. It seems like Curry could seem to work better with other players than Durant did. And maybe that's a big part of it. And that's where Durant maybe is more like Oscar Robertson, because Robertson had that knock against him as well.
Yeah, I think it's this is why it's so hard too, because again, do you look at it as just like from a pure standpoint of like, I'm starting a basketball team, who am I drafting?
Right.
Or do you look at it what they, accomplished in their career? Because like obviously Steph Curry has been in a fantastic situation for most of his career, getting to play with Draymond, getting to play with Clay. Obviously Durant signed there, and now he's getting to play with Wiggins and Poole, and Otto Porter signs there for the veterans minimum. So he's been in fantastic situations. Kevin Durant has been in good situations, but not as good as that. Other guys on this top 10 list have all been in really good situations. You don't get here by being unlucky. You got to catch some breaks too. But I think you look at those guys who don't quite make the top 10 list right now. Like a Kevin Durant, like an Oscar Robertson, whoever else you want to put in that, and say, okay, well, maybe if they were in the exact same situation, just swap them out for what Steph Curry has been in, maybe they're in the top 10. And I think that there's nuance to it that I think people have to appreciate too. And for me, obviously, as a Celtics fan, I'm gonna be saying that more people should respect Bill Russell and put him up higher. I saw that Chris Broussard had his list today, and he had Bill Russell at number 10. I think that's ridiculous. To put Shaq and Curry and Kobe over Bill Russell, I don't see how that makes any sense to me. But it's everybody's going to have their own reasons for making their top 10. So Sap, it's hard for me to say, but I do think today, and maybe it's just recency bias, I kind of feel like you have to put him in there now. But that doesn't mean that there aren't players that I still think are better than, but you got to take the breadth of the accomplishments and weigh this title against some of the other titles too, where this team maybe wasn't quite as good as some of those other wagons that they had, so that becomes all the more impressive. I feel like you have to do it today, and I've never said that before, Sap.
Yeah, to me, the first 9 that I mentioned, I think those are pretty much agreed upon. I think ESPN, their top 10, and I think that that's a valid list, has those 9 and Oscar Robertson, a little bit different order than me. They've got Jordan 1, LeBron 2, and whatever their order is. But I think the top 9 now are etched in stone. The debate becomes who's number 10. Is it Curry? Is it Oscar Robertson? Elgin Baylor is the forgotten guy. I mean, people just, for some reason, don't realize how great he was. It's the lack of titles. Exactly. That guy, he averaged 27, 15, and 5 for his career. I've had players that played against him, that's how old I am, tell me that he was the most unstoppable guy in the league. That
Tommy Heinsohn said that for years and years and years and years.
Without question. And Casey Jones told me the same thing, because Casey Jones was coaching the Celtics when Jordan put up the 63 in the postseason. And, I got to interview Casey Jones a million times, one of the classiest men I've ever met. And, I'd like to probe these guys because he played against them. He goes, Elgin Baylor was unstoppable. We just hoped he missed. There was no way you could defend him. If you held him to 40, 45, you had a good night. That's how good he was. So people forget about him. And then the centers. And again, it's also tough. How do you compare Steph Curry to Moses Malone?
Right.
I mean, how in the world? That's like 2 totally different animals. Steph Curry is, a thing of beauty. Moses Malone was a pit bull. I mean, he won out in a lot of talent, but also a lot of effort. And Elijah won, and Shaq, and I put Durant in there. Durant's in there. So there's like 8, 9 guys vying for number 10. And maybe it is recency bias, Jet, that, less than 24 hours ago, he won his 4th title and his first finals MVP. So let's throw him in there. But he certainly belongs in that discussion.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think this finals is what swung it for him. If he had lost this and, not had the finals MVP in the 4th ring, then I think that it may have devalued him. It may have dropped him down the list. If that may be unfair, but that's how it goes with these sports arguments. But yeah, I think today he is, Sap. And but I don't feel like he's a guy who, like, okay, you said like Bird, Kareem, Magic, Chamberlain, Jordan, LeBron, those guys are like, they're not going anywhere. They're entrenched,
No.
set in stone. Like, I do think there's active players in the league right now who could knock Curry off that list. We talked about one and Kevin Durant. I don't know what the rest of Luka's career is going to look like, but I think he has the skill level to do it. He's got a long way to go, obviously. Same with Giannis. I think he has the ability to do it too. Those are the two guys that pop into my head right now that I think have the ability to kind of knock on that door. They have to obviously do a whole lot more. Heck, Luka Doncic hasn't even been to the finals yet. So these guys are just gonna keep coming and coming and coming, Sap. But I don't feel like Curry's hold on that top 10 is it nearly as strong as some of those other guys. And like, I could see him drop out of it in the near future. The rest of those guys, it's going to take, a ridiculous amount to knock them off that perch, in my opinion.
Because here's the thing, if Curry gets a 5th title, now he's equal to to Duncan and Kobe. But I still always put those guys a little bit ahead because they were elite defenders. And that's part of it too. Like, it's a full court game and those other guys were bigger. It's a fascinating debate. And again, we're talking different eras. We're talking different positions. We're talking about who were your teammates, who were your opponents, what era did you play in? I mean, you can't really, play a physical style of defense now. But what he does is impacts the game so much, not just how the game is played. I'm just talking about his own team, that all of a sudden everybody on that team plays better because he just draws so much attention that he gets double teamed 35 feet from the basket. Now the rest of the Warriors are playing 4-on-3, and a player like Andrew Wiggins, who was considered a bust or at least a disappointment in Minnesota. I wouldn't call him a bust. He averaged roughly 20 points per game in Minnesota. He wasn't terrible. He wasn't Jabari Parker with his injuries and not really being a good player. I mean, Wiggins was pretty darn good in Minnesota, but now he's in a spot where he's, the 4th best player, the 3rd best player. Heck, in this series, he was the 2nd best player. But now he's getting open shots. All of a sudden, he goes 4 for 9 from 3 in the clinching game. And we know Klay Thompson and Steph Curry, that's the greatest offensive backcourt in the history of the sport because they play so well together. So he impacts what goes on in that organization, on that team. His leadership ability, too, that, okay, here comes Kevin Durant. He's smart enough and self-confident enough to say, okay, we're going to accept Kevin Durant. And when it comes time to win, I'll be willing to let him take the big shots. Now, maybe people will say, well, he's not an alpha. Michael Jordan would have never done that. Well, I don't know. Steph Curry seems to be doing pretty well for himself. And now with this title, I think he's elevated himself into that very, very high level.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And again, maybe this is something we revisit, in a couple months and see if it was really recency bias. But right now, I certainly feel like he's earned that, and he earned that Finals MVP. He was clearly the best player on the court. I know some people were saying, Andrew Wiggins. Andrew Wiggins was really good. Steph Curry was better in this series. And it was almost like he had a point to prove, right? In this series, didn't you kind of feel that way? And you saw how emotional he was at the end of the game too. He knows what people have been saying about, you only won because of Durant. You won because, LeBron was on subpar teams or playing with hurt teams. You never have a Finals MVP, blah, 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 blah. So he knew. And I think you saw that with him, and you saw it in his play. He had one bad game. His team won that game, Sap. So
right.
It's the mark of a really good player and a good leader. When you have a bad game, your team can still win. It's a good team. And Steph Curry, I think, has really vaulted himself from where I had him in like the 15 to 20 range. I think he's moved up that significantly with this Finals win.
Yeah, I had him right around there too. Him and Durant, they had kind of side by side, kind of like the way I have Magic and Bird side by side. Same era. Magic gets a slight nod over Bird because 5-3 in titles, beat him 2 out of 3 in the NBA Finals, and had a little longer prime than Bird. So just a slight edge with Magic over Bird, but they're so close. Same thing with Duncan and Kobe, same era, 2 best players of their particular era. I put them both over Shaq because of their consistency and durability. And I put Duncan a little bit ahead of Kobe because Kobe had some dips in there, right? I mean, his last 3 years, they averaged 21 wins per game. He got a coach fired. He quit in a couple of playoff series.
Right after Shaq left, they were not good, Seth.
They weren't very good. Yeah, and you remember Game 6 here against the Celtics, he mailed it in. I remember Game 7 against Phoenix, he mailed it in. And then again, Kobe Bryant's one guy you can never talk disparagingly about. People flip out. But, every player had their moments where they weren't quite themselves. But, yeah, it's interesting. And I think Durant and Curry are pretty darn close. But it's just that I think that Curry, his leadership ability is so good. I mean, I think he and LeBron are the two best leaders in the sport right now. And right now he's the reigning champ.
Yeah. So, congratulations to Steph Curry and the Warriors, though that, makes it tastes like bile in my mouth saying that, and seeing them celebrate on the parquet was awful. But they had the mental toughness, and they had the ability to learn from their mistakes because they've been there before, and the experience. And a lot of that is Steph Curry and believing what he's capable of doing on the court. And it ultimately led this group of Warriors to their 4th title. And I'm sure that next year they'll be right in the mix as well. I know they're already the favorites in Vegas. We'll see how that changes. The Celtics are the 2nd favorites. The Nets are the 3rd. We know how well that's gone for Vegas, picking the Nets recently. So we'll see. But long off season, Sap. I'm going to miss basketball. I'm considering adopting a WNBA team. I don't know which one yet. But we're going to have a lot of content throughout the summer, throughout the off season. So make sure you keep listening. Sap, I know we got some good guests lined up, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. We'll have guests throughout the summer. We've got the draft coming up. We've got free agency. The off season is short and certainly jam-packed.
Yep. So all that stuff is going to be on the table. We're going to be reacting to, all the big trades, free agency. We'll talk about the draft, and that's draft is next week. So there's no rest. The NBA is going to just keep right on rolling on. And we will be here to cover it all. So make sure you stay tuned to the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sep. Thanks to Full Press Coverage. And thanks to everybody who's listening throughout the season. Make sure, again, you stay tuned throughout the off season. We're not going to go away just because there's no games being played. Check out our social medias at JohnSap25, at Jet Stryer. Sap has a new article coming out on Full Press Coverage, so make sure you check that out on the website. I'm sure you'll tweet out the link to that as well, Sap, correct?
Absolutely.
When are we expecting that article?
Still working on it. Sometimes I work slowly.
So in like 4 months or so.
Yeah, exactly. I got away with a lot of stuff. Yeah, by then I'll probably come up with someone at number 10, probably over the next couple of days. Because what I do is I throw a lot of stuff up against the wall. I'm almost like Jackson Pollock. I just throw a lot of paint up against the canvas and see where it lands. I've just compared myself to a world-renowned artist. Why not?
I think you are, you're world-renowned artist in your own way. Sap,
that's right.
Would you consider this the official end to season 2 of the Pick and Roll NBA podcast? And now we're on to season 3. Would that seem fair?
Let's do that.
Okay.
Yes.
This is season 2 is a wrap. Sap, we're like 10 episodes away from our 200 episode mark. We'll have to do something for that.
Absolutely.
So yeah, make sure you stick around. We're not going anywhere. We're going strong. And the march for the Celtics to redeem themselves begins today, Sap. Begins today. So I will talk to everybody later and see ya. Thanks for listening, everybody.